1. When I was 18, my family and I moved to Woodstock, Ontario. Nice place, at first. I had to make new friends, and being a socially awkward anime fan, whose only other hobby is martial arts, made it difficult. How do you meet someone when all you can say about yourself is, "Hi, I like anime titties and arm bars"? But, while hitting up the local library for some reading material, my sister and I saw a poster. It read, Woodstock Anime and Manga Club. Well, shit. We could meet fellow weebs and be among our own kind at last. And we were, mostly. There I met a neckbeard. He is cool. I shall refer to him as Coolbeard. But he had a friend who was also a neckbeard. This is Rangerbeard. They both smelled bad, but Coolbeard was, well, cool. He's nice, and we still hang out sometimes. He's a little autistic, but a better friend I have not. Coolbeard looks gross. Let's not kid ourselves, he looks like a neckbeard, because he is one. His face is sorta pug-esque, and he smells like a pug too. Despite this, he is fun to be around. He can strike good conversation. He might seem dumb at first, but the longer you hang out with him, the more you realize that his brain is just wired differently. Rangerbeard, though, was always bitter and whiny. He made watching anime with the rest of the club a chore, as he would either complain about the choice of show or talk through it and spoil it for the rest of us. Rangerbeard was ugly inside and out. He would always have to interject with his own opinion, even when it wasn't asked for. And you could never just have your opinion. He wanted you to know his opinion and why it was the correct opinion. Rangerbeard sorta resembled Jack Black, if he had been lost at sea for 8 years. He had the same round face but a lot more facial hair. His hair was somehow curly and scraggly, and probably had enough grease to lube up a car. He also had this gap in his teeth, and you could hear a whistle when he drew breath. I recall our first interaction very well. Myself and Coolbeard were talking about movies, and naturally, we started chatting about Japanese monster movies. I'm a huge Godzilla fan, as is he. We talked about our favorite monsters, fights, etc. And eventually came to the topic of Power Rangers. Power Rangers was a huge part of my life as a kid. I took up martial arts partly because I wanted to be a Power Ranger. I was pretty into it as a kid, and only stopped watching because I was pretty much told I should. We begin discussing our favorite seasons when Rangerbeard overhears us and interjects with a, "Excuse me, but Time Force was the best season." Which I'll admit is great, but A, nobody asked him, and B, who cares? I gave him a quick look to acknowledge his presence and a simple, "That's nice," like a father speaking to his kid when he isn't really listening. Throughout the night, he constantly tries to interrupt me and Coolbeard, always having something to say about Power Rangers, while the two of us have moved on to other topics. After Anime Club, we would sometimes go to my house and watch more anime, usually stuff we couldn't watch during club. I invited Coolbeard, but for whatever reason, Rangerbeard decided to tag along. He just invited himself. While at my house, we decided to watch the NGE Rebuild movies, the two that were out at the time. I had never watched NGE at that point, so this was all new to me. Blasphemy, I know. Halfway through the movie, Rangerbeard spoils it. Everything. Gives away the whole series, or rather his interpretation of it. Since if you say you actually understood NGE, you're either full of shit, or you're full of shit. That made it rather difficult to enjoy the movies, since I now had a general idea of how the story would unfold. I spoke to Coolbeard about it later, and he agreed that Rangerbeard was kinda grating on him. He's put up with him for a lot longer than I have. They were school friends, and Coolbeard has the patience of a fucking saint. Another thing that irritated me was that Rangerbeard would go in tangents about waifus. I know what they are, and I couldn't care less about them. And whenever I would try to change the subject, it would go right back to waifus. After that, I told Coolbeard to never bring him to Anime Club again. He didn't. Instead, Rangerbeard would come on his own. This guy just never got the hint, and not very many people liked him. I even got the feeling that Coolbeard only hung out with him out of pity. Despite this, he still showed up every single week, until one day, I brought in my Wii. with Project M installed on it, and we had a Smash tournament. One of the other club members picked Peach, and Ranger Beard fucking lost it. He went off about how Peach was his and that he called dibs on her, and no one else could play as her. This guy was 18, by the way, as in 10 with an additional 8 years on top. He did not act like it. There also wasn't any rule about not playing as the same character, nor was he setting the gig up. It was my idea, my console, my copy of the game, and my controllers that he was about to put his unwashed monkey paws on. I gave him an ultimatum, either calm down or leave. He calmed down, picked Zelda because waifus, I guess, and shut up for most of the night. I spoke to the organizer of the club after it was over, and we pretty much agreed that Ranger Beard was hindering the enjoyment of the other club members, and that he was no longer welcome. I was all too happy to tell him this, and for a brief moment, took a bit of pleasure in delivering this news to him. Afterwards, I only saw him here and there. Apparently, he tried to kill himself, spent a year in a psych ward, and lost a fuckload of weight. Despite this, he still smelled bad. Once a neckbeard, I guess. From what Coolbeard has told me, he hasn't really changed much. 2. When I started college, I was a 17-year-old female chemistry major, and during the course of the college I attracted some weirdos. What with being kind of a rarity. Most of the time I was fine. I could tell them I wasn't interested and they'd leave me alone. But one creepy dude will forever stand out in my mind. When I was taking my first college chemistry lab, I ended up in a lab group with a friend of mine, and a guy neither of us knew. He didn't look older than us by much, but we later found out he was 23, and was starting college later because he had served in the military. Let's call him OC for older creep. Everything seemed fine until we got closer to the end of the semester. Since it was my first semester, I really wanted to do well on my finals and wanted a study buddy. My friend was actually really bad at chemistry and was planning on changing her major, so I asked OC if he would like to study with me. He agreed and we met a few times, and each time things got a little weirder. At first he would talk about his motorcycle and how awesome it was, and then he talked about how he would race his brother on it, clearly trying to show me how badass he was. He also talked about how, since he was a former Marine, he was really strong and he could take me down if he wanted to. This probably should have been more of a warning sign, but I didn't really take it too seriously since I was about 4 inches taller than him and he wasn't that intimidating looking. I was also 17 and naive. The last time we studied, we met in my dorm room because he lived off campus. He started going on about the same usual stuff, and I was starting to get really annoyed because our final was the next day. We're sitting on a couch together and I'm going through my practice exam, when I look over and he's reaching towards me as if he's going to put his arm around me. I must have given him a weird look because then, instead of putting his arm around me, he pretended to punch me in the face in slow motion. It was the weirdest thing a guy has ever done to me. And then, throughout the rest of the night, he kept doing it. I'd be minding my own business, trying to study, and he'd be slow-mo punching me in the face. It was so weird. Finally, we'd get done studying, and it's like 10 p.m. He asks me if he can sleep on my couch. My roommate isn't around, and I don't know him that well, so I told him no. Then he starts whining about how far he has to drive to get home and begging to stay. I continue to say no, and he starts to suggest that if he gets into an accident, it'll be my fault. Now I'm really uncomfortable, so I keep saying no, and finally he leaves. The semester ends, and thankfully, I don't end up in any of the same classes as him next semester. The second semester of chemistry was pretty tricky for me, so I ended up signing up for a free tutoring service that my college offered. My tutor was this awesome badass lesbian who I'm still friends with now, 10 years later. She was a good tutor, and even when I didn't have questions, we'd still meet up just so she could get paid by the school. Then it happened. OC got assigned to be tutored by her in the same time slot I had. As soon as he saw me, he started going into all the same stuff as before, talking about his motorcycle and how badass he was. It was so annoying. But this time my tutor friend was there. She took great pleasure in shutting him down since she could tell I was clearly not interested. Eventually, She got so annoyed with him that she put him into someone else's schedule, so I didn't have to see him anymore. I thought that was the last of him, but fate had one more encounter with him in store. About a year later, I was eating lunch with a friend in one of the on-campus food courts. We're eating our lunches and chatting when I look over and see OC from across the hall. We make eye contact and he gets a skeevy grin and starts walking over to us. I groan internally, knowing how annoying this is going to be. He slides up to our table and leans on it, trying to act all slick.
"Hey cutie, how's it going?"
he says, leaning at me. I'm about to reply when I sense a disturbance in the force. There's a rumble in my stomach that can't be denied. I open my mouth and out comes one of the loudest belches I've ever made in my entire life. And that belch just went right in OC's face. My friend and I immediately burst out laughing and OC straightens up, turns around and walks away, without another word. He never spoke to me again. 3. So both of these stories take place at the Comic-Con here in my country. It was my first time going to a big convention, so I was really excited. But also kinda worried about what kind of weird and creepy people I'd encounter there, since I've only been to one small local con before, and already met a really creepy guy. Well, my fears turned out to be true. Characters me, S, 19 years old, very tiny and skinny girl. I don't look special at all, to be honest, just your average blonde girl. I was wearing a Star Wars shirt at the time, will be important later. M, my sister, 15, looks like a slightly heavier and far better dressed clone of me. E, my boyfriend, 19, tall, ginger, wears glasses. He's actually quite athletic, so I guess he kinda counts as a Chad. He's really friendly and would never do anything that could upset anyone on purpose. So on to weird encounter number 1. Furrybeard. Me and M were chilling at a Star Trek themed booth. They had set up a little tossing game where you had to toss as many tribbles through holes cut into a wall as possible. If you got at least 5, you could choose a prize from the table full of Star Trek merch. So I chose a model kit for a Klingon battlecruiser. Then I heard it.
"Hey, I wanted that one."
I turned around and spotted a guy wearing the weirdest and creepiest excuse for a fursuit I had ever seen. He was wearing very well-made looking hand and feet paws, sleeves that had a lanyard with some drawings of his character dangling around his neck. He wasn't wearing a fursuit head though, just 2 long, floppy ears that looked like as if he had pulled socks on over his ears, and a dog nose that you could get for a few euros at every store selling Halloween costumes. Before I could say anything, he started rambling about how I didn't deserve that model kit since I probably hadn't seen all the episodes of Star Trek. He also called me a fake fan for wearing my Star Wars shirt. I love both franchises. I didn't respond to him and just walked away. But he followed me for quite a while, occasionally shouting at me to do what he says. Luckily, he then gave up, and I didn't even see him for the rest of the con. Number 2 was actually a Legbeard. She was sitting behind us while me and Dee were watching a League of Legends tournament that was held at the con. There were actually some pretty cool teams there, and we even got to meet our favorite team, which was amazing. Some staff members would randomly throw merchandise into the crowd during the tournament, and Dee managed to catch at least one of each of the different things they'd throw. Last but not least, they threw kinda squishy, about 15cm long big figures of the minions in the game into the crowd, and he actually managed to catch 3 of them. We then heard the Legbeard complain about how she didn't get one because E caught all 3. So he gave her one and she smiled at him as if he had just handed her 1,000 euros. After the game, she thanked E once again for giving her one of his minions. Both of us actually thought she was just an awkward but nice girl at this point, until she started demanding a hug from E. After she had asked him at least 10 times and actually looked kinda upset about it, he said yes. She didn't let go though, but started saying that she wants to kiss him. She must have thought I was either just a friend of E or his sister or something, since she had completely ignored me. E looked at me like a deer in the headlights, mouthing, "Help." So I kindly asked her to let go of my boyfriend. Her expression changed within seconds from happy to really freaking angry. She looked at E, then back at me, then she asked E why he would date such a bitch, and that he deserved someone better. That was the point where both of us have had enough. E pushed her away, took my hand, and we left her alone. About an hour later, when we were walking through the artist alley, we saw her again. She came running towards E with open arms, awaiting another hug. But E stepped aside and she actually tripped. She once again started rambling about how much of a hoe I am, and that I'm probably fucking 10 other guys too. And about what he's missing out on because he doesn't want to hug and kiss her. When she got back up, she literally screamed into my face about how shitty I am, grabbed my hair and apparently wanted to pull on it. You have to know, E never freaks out and barely gets angry, except for when someone dares to touch someone who's important to him. And oh boy does he get angry then. This girl had just unleashed the beast. He never touched her during the whole thing, but damn, he murdered her twice using just words. He barely insults people, but when he does, he always finds their weakest spots. He also never uses swear words. He calls it destroying people by telling them the truth. He screamed at Legbeard, Legbeard screamed some random swear words back at him, until Constaff separated the two and asked what happened. He told them his side of the story. They didn't really seem to believe him at first, since Legbeard cried and claimed that he had hit her several times. But the people witnessing the whole thing confirmed to the staff that E had never even touched her, or called her any bad words, so they let us go. Honestly, I have no idea what happened to Legbeard afterwards. We definitely didn't see her again, though. 4. So this past summer, I went to a freshman seminar for the college I was accepted to. It was many silly icebreakers and familiarizing us with campus. All was fine and dandy until I arrived late to one of the presentations. There were 2 seats left in the back of the small auditorium. One was next to a small 12-year-old, "What are you doing here?" and some guy my age. I didn't get a good look at him, but I sat down next to my peer anyways. This was my mistake. As the presentation went on, I laughed at some of the corny college jokes being told, and the guy next to me gave off this really odd vibe of being super focused on everything I did, laughing when I did, and turning to see my reaction every few seconds. I didn't think much of this until we went out to an event for science majors. Lucky for him, we were in the same major, so we were split off into the same group. I walked behind him and noticed he kept looking behind to look at me. This is when I really got a good look at him. It was like a pre-neck beard, as he didn't even have enough hormones to grow any true facial hair. He was thin and skinny and had glasses that made his eyes seem 2 times as small, with hair that was shiny with grease. Anyways, as the icebreaker goes on, I ignore him and refuse to look at him to encourage his behavior. I felt his stare the whole time. Meanwhile, I begin to walk to this guy who seemed really chill and friendly, John. So we stood there talking while the rest of the group went on. However, the creep who I will call Pity Party stood staring at us and finally walked up to introduce himself. I pride myself on being a positive person, and I like to be with people who are positive too. This is why all my alarm bells went off when he opened his mouth. "Wow, the one day I'm not at home alone, I get a text from someone to hang out. God, I'm so unlucky. I can't believe I'm talking to a girl." Read Femoid. "This is making my day." He continued spouting on about how lonely he was and how no girl talked to him or liked him. I was ready to just leave him because I already knew where he was headed with this monologue. But I have an issue of being rude, so I continued to politely nod. We walked into the nearby town. Both John and Pity Party live nearby and wanted to show me around, and we walked around for a while. PP constantly tried to get as close to me as he could and completely ignores John, only talking to me. I mentioned I went to a horse show in a town nearby when he nearly yelled that he lived right next to the showgrounds and to visit him next time. I politely declined with some BS reason, but he insisted, saying something like, "I'm so lonely and no girls like me and I'm always rejected," to guilt me. I stuck to my answer. He then asked me about where I lived, where I worked, where I'd be living on campus, etc., etc. I managed to not give away any info in fear he'd try to visit sometime. Shudder. At one point, I asked John for his Snapchat because he seemed genuinely cool and I wanted to know someone for the upcoming semester. Pity Party butted in with, "Snapchat, pff, I'd rather have your number so I can talk to such a pretty girl." I just pretended like I didn't hear him. I was so ready to just drop the "I have a boyfriend" bomb, but I was afraid how he'd react, especially since it was dark out and very isolated where we were. This is where things get super fucking creepy. John mentions how hot and sticky it is out there, and how he is not excited to use the communal bathrooms. I laugh and agree, and that I don't even know where they are on each floor. Not really thinking much about what I said. Immediately, in the sleaziest tone, PP offers to show me where the showers are on my floor. I'd just have to let him into my room and floor using my key card. Of course I decline. And he retorts with some bullshit about how lonely he is and how he just wants to spend time with me. At the end of the night, I essentially slammed the door leading to my floor shut, in fear he'd try to follow me. The next morning I steered clear of him at every event. It's now a few months into the semester and I still see him around, more often and close to my dorm than I'd like. I also should add, this campus houses over 10,000 students, and has over 20,000 enrolled. How I see him this often I'll never know. He makes sad puppy dog eyes every time and I just ignore him. I pray for the girls he encounters in his classes. Sorry if the ending was a little anticlimactic. Me and John are friends and sometimes laugh about how creepy he was. Thought y'all would like to laugh some too. 5. Okay, so I guess it's time. I promised part 2, so here it is. I welcome thee back, ladies and gentle sirs, to the story of Busbeard. This time he was encountered in his natural habitat, a Comic-Con. So the key players in this continuation: me, the gender-bended Mad Hatter in all her cosplay glory, including my short purple hair curled so tightly that it turns into a Scott fro, as I like to call it. Basically, I look like Braves Merida if her hair was cut shoulder length and colored purple. Hyperactive, but slightly frazzled due to being up at 7 a.m. to do my handiwork, caffeine deprived and hungry, in full ADHD buzz. Gecko, my best friend and the biggest teddy bear on the planet. A lovable, childish cook, but he's also tired and groggy from the early start and lack of food. My knight in shining Zelda paraphernalia, yes, he's wearing his favorite Zelda shirt, and his Zelda patch attached to his body warmer, and his Zelda baseball cap on. Dude Bro, my old school acquaintance, the front row spectator to the first encounter with Busbeard, and an all-round sweet guy, huge Star Wars nerd. Sith, Dude Bro's fiancée again, a huge Star Wars nerd. She was decked out in her own OC Sith Lordess gear, red lightsaber, black cloak and all. Trooper, minor character, Dude Bro's buddy and fellow Star Wars nerd. Named so because both he and Dude Bro were dressed as stormtroopers. A bit of a knob, but a nice enough guy, you'll find out why. Kingpin, minor character but important enough to mention, as he was incredible. One of the professional photographers perusing the venue for the cosplay artist to picture. Named so as he looks just like the Spider-Man villain of the same name, sans the fact that he has a slight goatee growing at the time. Tall, portly fellow. And of course, Busbeard, the neckbeard of this saga, now thinking he's the reincarnation of some great legendary samurai, because he's carrying an obscenely long Final Fantasy blade around. Still a Class A cunt. Let's do this. So, from where we kicked off last time, I had got off the bus at the hub, continued to speak with Dude Bro, and then we parted ways as I got on to bus 3. When I got to Gecko's house, I immediately told him about the situation over Chinese takeout, laughed about it and forgot about it, until the next day. We had, unfortunately, missed the bus to the con, so we had Gecko's uncle drive us up. Great start to the day, I know, right? But it got better, so much better. The con was absolutely phenomenal to begin with, despite the rocky start. The hall in which the con was being held in was huge and had 3 separate atriums, in which different aspects of the con were separated. Sci-fi in the left atrium, beside the food court, anime in the right atrium, and the horror section in the first floor atrium. I had immediately made a beeline for the sci-fi section as soon as I saw the full-scale, fully functioning model of the TARDIS from Doctor Who against the far wall. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, especially all things 10th Doctor, David Tennant for the win, so naturally I wanted to go and stand inside it and have a few photos done. Naturally, I dragged Gecko behind me. He's not much of a Whovian, but he's got an interest in technology and gaming. And the game stalls right next to the TARDIS were the perfect compromise for him taking pictures of me dicking around the big blue box. In this time, I did see a small troop of stormtroopers dicking around the Star Wars display, joined by a Darth Maul, 2 Darth Vaders, 2 Leias, one in the gold bikini, one in the white robe and space buns, an OC Sith Lordess, and father-son duo of Boba Fett and a Jawa bounty. I paid them little mind as I was far more intrigued by the Doctor Who section, the steampunk section, and the game stalls. After a couple of hours of musing over the sci-fi atrium, the food court opened for business. But as everyone decided to have the same idea of make a beeline for the cafeteria as soon as it opens just because, we decided to hang back and go check out the other 2 atriums. However, on our way around to the anime atrium, I was pulled aside by a few photographers for the event for photo shoots, and I happily obliged. I was having professional photo shoots done for free. How could I complain about that? It was a fantastic experience for me to partake in. However, it was when I stepped away from the second shoot that I saw a familiar face that I had desperately hoped wouldn't be there. A face that was leering right at me. Busbeard had shown up to Comic-Con. And by Odin's grey ghost was he a sight to behold in all his neckbeard glory. Cargo shorts that crept up his legs, a My Little Pony shirt that I think should have been pink but was faded to oblivion, and stretching in a very unflattering way across his rolls. The same fucking fedora now with a large obscene unicorn pin stuck to it. Floor-length trench coat that looked a few sizes too tight in the arms and... brace yourselves. A pair of neon pink Crocs with stained threadbare socks on underneath. Welcome to Bonnie Britain, folks, where socks and sandals are found in all varieties. Now, given the trench coat was somewhat appropriate as it was fucking freezing out, being late August, this is Britain, our summer is 2 weeks of sunshine in June. Heat is rare here. Even as a metalhead, I own a bog-standard leather trench coat for the winter months too. Difference being, I know how to dress a trench coat. Busbeard, however, did not. Another thing about Britain, though, is that you're not actually allowed to carry unsheathed mock weapons around on the streets. They need to be kept sheathed until you're in an approved venue. And even then, it's advised to keep them sheathed unless your weapon is foam-made. However, Busbeard had a greatly inappropriate full-scale mock rendition of the Masamune blade of Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. If nobody's seen this blade full scale from pommel to tip, it's 70 inches in length. This sword is longer than I am tall, and he's just swinging it over his shoulders unsheathed. The security guards on duty were watching him somewhat apprehensively, but they knew they couldn't do much along the lines of public reprimand apart from asking him to sheath his blade, or physically restraining him should he attempt to go for anyone with the blade. Sure, these replicas are made of flimsy, dull steel, but they could smart like a bitch if you're hit by them. The hairs on the back of my neck went up the minute I caught Busbeard leering at me, but I tried to shake him off. Gecko, who had decided to get a couple pictures of me after my second shoot, noticed that my face had dropped. "Are you okay, Wolf?" he asked. I shook off the leering Busbeard and smiled at Gecko. "I'm fine, honey. I think we better get some food soon, though. Or something to drink at the very least." "Thought you'd never ask," Gecko chuckled. "I'm starving." "You're always starving," I giggled back, smacking him gently on the chest. This is true, by the way. Gecko could eat a small house and still be hungry 2 hours later. If you cooked for him, you'd be cooking for 8, and he's 4 of the 8 guests. He kissed me on the forehead, just a little gesture of affection. We may have been ex-partners, but he was still a good friend to me. I could see Busbeard scoffing indignantly as he turned on his heel and made his way back into the anime side of the atrium, and made his way through the back door to the staircase to the horror atrium. My heart sunk slightly. They had some makeup artists and a couple of crew members from The Walking Dead up there, doing media makeup classes and poster signings, and I had wanted to go up and talk to them. I was half convinced Andrew Lincoln, aka Rick Grimes, would be there, as he lives not far away from where the convention was being hosted. I met him once before in my local bowling alley, but I'd not been prepared back then. Now I was, and I had my autograph pad in hand. But food came first. By this point, the cafeteria had cleared out somewhat, so Gecko and I found a table near the door and ordered some food and a couple cans of energy drinks. I decided to scroll through my social media feeds to check out the news updates on the convention, including the times for the competition and showcases and the booth signings, yada yada yada. I was in full hyper-focus mode, so it didn't even occur to me that his shadow had been lurking over me the whole time. I didn't notice Gecko smirking at me until I looked up from my phone for a brief moment. He gestured for me to turn around. As I went to turn, a voice boomed out from behind a sheet of plastic.
"This is the longest it has ever taken someone to notice me!"
I almost jumped out of my skin as I looked up in terror at this dude who stood at an impressive 6'something, dressed in full stormtrooper body armor with the helmet firmly on. A tipple of laughter emanated from the nearby tables who witnessed the incident, whilst I struggled to regain composure. In an effort to ground myself, I looked around for something to grab my attention, and that's when I noticed an unhelmed stormtrooper stood next to the Sith Lordess at the cashier, their arms wrapped around each other. The unhelmed trooper had looked over his shoulder to see what the commotion was, and my face lit up. It was Dude Bro. He smirked at me, and after paying for his food, he and the Lordess, Sith, who he introduced to me as his fiancée, joined us for lunch. The other dude in uniform was introduced to me as Trooper, and he apologized for scaring me after I explained that I had ADHD, which caused me to space out and lose all concept of my surroundings. We laughed, we joked, we had some fun as we ate. I finally had some food in me and some caffeine, so I was happier. I still, however, couldn't shake that gut feeling that I would be dealing with Busbeard again at some point. After lunch, I parted ways with Trooper, Sith, and Dude Bro. Gecko and I decided to go hunt around the anime atrium for a little bit. But considering it was overpacked to the point of claustrophobic, I decided to give it a skip for a bit while Gecko perused the Yu-Gi-Oh! Collections, and head up to the horror atrium, in hoping I would find Andrew Lincoln. Boy oh boy, would I find something more disturbing than my favorite post-apocalyptic cop. The first apocalyptic thing I noticed was stench of sweat, cheese, tobacco, and garlic. At first I put the garlic-like smell down to the table of SFX makeup, at which the Walking Dead artists were sat at. If people weren't aware, molding rubber used to create skin effects is a bit pungent when in its liquid state. However, the smell became stronger when a presence came up behind me. A sweaty hand came to my shoulder. Unfortunately, a few years of MMA and judo training made my reflexes instantly kick in. I spun on my heel, my staff in hand with the decorative brass pommel, aimed directly for the cranium of my targeted assailant. I came into contact with the oversized hilt of an oversized katana, and I was met face to face with the stench of powerful garlic-scented halitosis. Nope, it wasn't the sculpting rubber that smelled of pungent garlic. It was Busbeard's breath. The sound of my brass staff against cheap steel rung out loud enough to make everyone in the room stop. The poor makeup artists at the table had been made to scramble out the way of the tip of the monstrous blade that was wiggling in the space where their faces had been.
"Ah, Milady Wolf!"
Busbeard smirked at me, lowering the 5-foot-long Masamune to the ground. I just gave him a menacing smirk in response. I said a little prayer to myself to give me the strength to hand this moron's ass back to him like I had the previous day. Unfortunately for Busbeard, I was on an ADHD buzz, running on low energy from the lack of proper hydration, and still shaken from the claustrophobia of the anime atrium. "What do you want?" I snapped at him quite harshly as the foot of my staff reconnected with the ground, with a click. He recalled back like a scared puppy.
"I just wanted to apologize for yesterday,"
he replied. I gave him a suspicious look. Oh no. I wasn't falling for this crap. I just crossed my arms and raised my eyebrows at him, waiting to see which glorious excuse he was going to come up with.
It just riles me up to see good girls throw themselves away to disgustingly thick-headed thugs. I beg you to reconsider me as a possible mate. I would spoil you and treat you like a princess.
Yeah, noted. You've seen me with my boyfriend today, and I'm not about to spread my legs for the likes of you. Again, I reiterate Gecko is my ex-partner, but this gag I was running was my safety net, and I knew Gecko wouldn't mind it. Busbeard pouted at me like a child being denied candy, but I just turned away from him. Before he could protest any further, Gecko appeared in the doorway and called me into the hallway. I made for him as quickly as I could and wrapped my arms around his neck. "You okay up there?" Gecko asked. "Yeah, I'm fine." A lie, of course. I didn't bother mentioning the sulking man-child stood in the middle of the horror atrium. I could do with another drink, though, and the bathroom. That wasn't a lie. I was getting parched again, and my bladder felt like it was about to burst. We headed back downstairs into the anime atrium and found a vending machine. Whilst getting drinks, we ran into the one called Kingpin. He gave me a look of bewilderment for a moment until we met eyes. He walked over to me, beaming, and asked me for a photo shoot. I happily obliged.
Cool. My little studio setup is upstairs in the horror atrium. If you meet me upstairs in 5, I'll have everything set up and ready.
I cringed inwardly as Kingpin said this. Busbeard was still up there, most likely sulking. The last thing I needed was to be trying to do a photo shoot with Busbeard trying to look straight down my corset. But I wanted this shoot done. The more pictures I can get done, the better chance I have of building a decent portfolio. And the sooner I can pursue cosplay as more than just a once-in-a-blue-moon thing. I grimaced, but accepted. Kingpin bounded off excitedly and disappeared upstairs while I got my drink and found the ladies' room. I was now dreading going back upstairs, and once I met Gecko back in the corridor, I was getting cold feet. He eventually talked me around, and I decided, fuck it. If Busbeard was going to sit front row, I was going to put on a damn show unapologetically. Of course, as Sod's Law would have it, by the time I got upstairs for the shoot, Busbeard had vanished. He'd apparently taken off back downstairs after getting freaked out by a Pennywise cosplay artist. Admittedly, I don't do brilliant with clowns. I had severe colorophobia as a child, but it's been wearing off with age, so I actually thank the Pennywise for scaring off the neckbeard. Oh, but it didn't stop him from trying to make a comeback. Post-shoot, I got Kingpin's details so he could send my edited photos to me, and went on the hunt for Gecko, considering the fact that he'd buggered off back downstairs to scope out the fantasy sword stalls. I walked through the doors to the anime atrium to see a small scene occurring over by the sword stall. My heart sunk, hoping that Gecko hadn't gotten himself into a sword fight with Busbeard. I pushed my way through the crowd to see that indeed Busbeard was the epicenter of the scene. But it wasn't Gecko he tried to fight, it was Dudebro. The Masamune had skittered to under a table, and Busbeard looked like he was on the verge of tears. Whatever I had missed, it had been good. I saw Gecko stood nearby, looking perplexed by the whole scenario, and I stepped towards him, only for Busbeard to directly block my path. It was as if, upon seeing me, he had regained his macho mojo and was ready to jump back into the ring for round 2 as he stared Gecko down now, his back to me.
"I will fight thee for thy lady's honor,"
Busbeard squeaked at Gecko, triumphantly sniffing. Gecko burst into a fit of laughter.
"What's so funny? You think that you could beat me?"
Now it was my turn to start laughing as Gecko's fit of laughter turned into an infectious belly laugh. A lot of people witnessing this scene now couldn't help laughing with Gecko. Busbeard stood a good 5 inches shorter than Gecko. He was closer to my height. There was no way he could surpass 5'6". Gecko is 5'11". Gecko just continued laughing. "Son, Wolf could beat you single-handedly, and I can lift her over my head with one arm. I would end up beating you to a pulp, so I'm not going to. Go be a child somewhere else." The sound that came from Busbeard following this statement can only be described as the one sound every neckbeard hunter dreams of hearing in the wild. The elusive Ree. Yes, this motherfucker reed in the middle of the convention building, causing nearly everything to come to a standstill. I managed to meet eyes with Dudbro and Trooper, and we exchanged a look that just screamed, what the actual frick-frack snick-snack ever-loving shit was that? Again, the convention hall erupted with laughter. From where I stood, I could see the back of Busbeard's neck roll turning deep scarlet. He had managed to embarrass himself in his natural habitat.
All of you pathetic, half-bred creatures will never understand,
Busbeard erupted. Not like many people listened to his outbursts as they just continued to laugh. But still he continued,
Dumb fuckers, the lot of you, air-headed sluts and brain-dead chads, I'll show you.
I'm paraphrasing here, but he essentially went on a tirade about how all of us were subhuman, inferior creatures compared to him. To finish his rant, he let out another ree of frustration, causing further laughter. With this, he went for his blade, and, as if Loki was smiling down on me, a moment of pure comedy occurred. I shit you not, this happened. He went to grab his blade, and his croc twisted, causing him to fall over his own 2 feet, and crash face first onto the ground. His head bouncing off the floor, and a small puddle of blood started to pool under his mouth and nose area. The laughter stopped for a few seconds, as it does, the calm before the storm, and we all watched with bated breath, waiting for Busbeard to pick himself back up. He did after a few seconds of dazed stupor, and we all saw the damage. Not only had he managed to shatter his nose and break 2 teeth, but he had also landed straight on his magnificent blade and snapped it in half. The crossguard and hilt rolled away from the blade and stopped a few inches shy of Gecko's foot. Jaws dropped in horror. These gigantic blades do not come cheap, even for the low quality. They are only available to American buyers, and this dude had been shipped this one by someone he knew in America, as he'd been bragging about how someone in America sent him it. I've seen the prices of these things. Cheapest I've found for a proper replica piece is $235 plus $90 shipping. For further international shipping from America to the UK, you're looking for a further $50 for large goods. So yeah, over $350 for a gigantic blade of carbon steel, snapped by this gargantuan behemoth's own body weight. If you had watched this in slow motion, you could have pinpointed the very second Busbeard realized what he had done. And the instant regret flashed across his face. And yes, the floodgates were unleashed. From the mouth of Busbeard came another unholy ree, which morphed into a roar of neckbeardy anguish and rage. It was as if someone had spoiled the fact that his favorite waifu died in the anime. I could have seen red if I wasn't so shocked by what had just happened. This idiot had just broken a sword worth £290, or $375. I wish I had £290 to just waste on the blade of my favorite Final Fantasy villain.
Dude,
I blurted out, mortified.
You just... Shut the fuck up, bitch!
He screamed at me, wailing as tears now streamed down his face, merging with the blood pooling in his mouth. We all just watched in a mixture of awe and apathy for this moron as he hauled himself up from the floor, swept up the 2 pieces of his sword and made for the door, bawling his eyes out. No sympathy had for him. Nobody knew what to say, so we just had to stand there in stunned silence. After a couple of agonizingly long minutes of silence, someone appeared with a mop and some kitchen roll and cleaned the little blood pool, and the sweat pool in the shape of Busbeard's body. Gecko approached me and snapped me out of my stunned bemusement. After some brief discussion about what the fuck had just happened, we continued on with our day. The convention just carried on as normal, and the strange case of Busbeard was all but forgotten about. Even throughout the rest of the festivities, we would hear the odd person mock a ree, and a cluster of laughter would emerge. I came 3rd place in the cosplay contest, won a signed book by a steampunk author in attendance. We later discovered a kid had found the 2 halves of the Masame behind the dumpster at the side of the building. So not only had this dude been a fucking asshole to me and my entire troop, but he also dumped a perfectly fixable piece worth nearly $400. I'm safe calling him an absolute cunt at this point. Good riddance. And I never did find Andrew Lincoln, though. And so concludes Busbeard's two-part saga. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Neckbeards in the Wild, number 17. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. I'll keep this outro nice and short since it is the Sunday. Just hope you all have a very nice weekend, and whatever you may be doing, have oodles of fun. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.